My name is David Summer. I'm the chair of the executive committee of Counter. And it's been quite a big year for Counter with the release of Release 5 of the Code of Practice, which we'll be telling you a lot about over the next 40 minutes. Just to say, Counter is a membership organisation, and we're very grateful for all of our members, library consortium members, and very grateful for their support. And if anybody would like to find out more about being a member, Lorraine Estelle is our project director at the front, so she'd be very happy to talk to you afterwards, I'm sure. So we've got three great speakers lined up for you this morning. First of all, Athena Hoeppner from the University of Central Florida. She is going to talk about a general introduction to Counter and to the book reports. Second up then is Sonja Lendi from Elsevier. Sonia is going to talk about the new journal reports and how you can use them. And then finally, we have Kornelia Junge from Wiley, and Connie is going to be talking about working with Counter reports in Excel. And for those of you that have seen our latest Friendly Guide video, Connie is the star of that video, so you get to meet her in person. And then we'll have about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So without further ado, I'll introduce Athena Hoeppner from the University of Central Florida. Athena.
All right, thank you. And it's exciting to see so many people here. I know I am very keenly interested in Counter, but I don't necessarily expect it's, I think it may be a little bit nerdy for some people. So it's nice to see everyone here. My slides look wrong. Okay, there they go. Well, we'll skip the first slide. I'm the Discovery Services Librarian at the University of Central Florida, and a lot of those duties involve being basically an electronic resources librarian. So that means that I'm the person who oversees all of our statistics gathering, and people come to me with questions about our usage, and when Counter changes, they have a lot of questions about why things are different this year than last year, and so forth. So I'm going to go over just really quickly a few concepts about Counter and what it is, and maybe a little bit about what it isn't. And then I'm going to get into a few use cases about books and some interesting things that I've done recently with our book usage reports. So first of all, Counter is a code of practice that is really used by vendors. We librarians, I don't know how many in here are librarians versus vendors, but we librarians kind of think of it as something for us, but it's really designed to help the vendors create very consistent, comparable, and credible reports for us. And it's audited, so it's not just, oh, well, we sort of think we're following it. There's a validation tool. It translates the interactions on interfaces into these reports, and it doesn't interpret the intent of users. That's not something it can do. Here's JSTOR's map of how they interpret different things that are done on their platform into a Counter R5 metric. And I know you can't read it, but this is up on their website. R4 had 24 different report types. It was getting a little bit unwieldy and tangled. R5 has the same information. Actually, it has more attributes and more consistency, but it has 4 master reports that organize all of the data, and then it has 12 standard reports that are for different looks or slices of that data. And I know this is maybe a lot to read too, so don't even bother. All of this is available to you offline. So I'm going to be looking at mostly the title master book reports. Here are the attributes that are available in all of the reports. Now, not all of these attributes are available in every report, every standard report, or even every title master report. They're in the reports that match they're the ones they're relevant to. I'm going to talk more about data type, section type, and metric type today. I find them very useful and interesting, and there's new approaches to them in Counter 5. So the data type is identifying the type of content that's being used, and that's pretty straightforward. You'll see this if you're using a search interface. You might see the filters for these sorts of things. The section type is even more granular, so you say, okay, maybe the data type was book, and the section type is book, so someone got the whole book, or it was a section type chapter. So that can be a very nice clarifying distinction. The metric types is what took me the longest to get my head wrapped around. So I've highlighted over here, there's blue things that are the types of thing that was done, an investigation. Someone's clicking around, looking at the information that's available, a request. someone is getting the full content item, either viewing it or downloading it, something like that. And then there's, of course, searches. And then I've also highlighted items and titles. Items is typically, it's a little more vague. It can be a book, it can be a chapter, it can be an article. It's the thing, the full content thing usually, or information bit. And then title is specifically the article or the book. Title would not be a chapter. And then unique and total. These sound, okay, that kind of makes sense, but it can be a little hard to wrap your head around. A total thing is, I clicked around in this one view for this book, I clicked around on different chapters, I clicked on different descriptions and table of contents. That is going to be all counted in total item investigations, whereas if I'm looking just at one book, that might be one unique title investigation. So let me click over. So if I'm clicking around on something like this, I've done a lot of clicks, and it might look into metrics, or convert into metrics sort of like this. I have a couple of questions on here because it's not always really straightforward. And even whom I'm supposed to know what I'm talking about, and I've read the Code of Practice a couple of times, I still end up with questions. So it's natural to sometimes wonder, but there are people who are experts that you can turn to. And then there is, of course, the whole Code of Practice code itself. So if you do have questions about them, don't hesitate to ask. Am I supposed to count this click on this chapter twice? That one was PDF and one was the HTML page? Does that count twice or once? Go ahead and ask. And then it generates a report like this. So I'm going to go a little faster now so we can get into the use cases. But like I said, there's resources you can turn to. Here's the friendly guides. They're online. So that's some background. Now digging into what you might do with these in the book cases particularly. So some things you might want to do, of course, you want to compare your current stats with your previous stats. That's something we've done for years, something we do every year. And compare between institutions, particularly if you're in a consortia. Compare between vendors and their platforms, and then looking at patterns between your spending and your usage are very common things that people want to do. So use case one, comparing the previous year with this year is complicated right now because R4 is a different code of practice. But there are some guidelines about how to do it, and some basic tips would be use standard reports because they're really designed to try and help you compare previous reports with the current ones. And you can also use the unique title request if you're looking for your BR1 type report, and your total item request if you're looking for your BR2 reports. And you can, again, this is available online, so you can look up how to do these matches. Be aware of some of the differences though. The gold open access is no longer included in the general counting, so you have to look for that a little bit separately. I don't have time to dig into it really deeply. Case 2 and 3, vendor to vendor and institution to institution. And I have apples and pears here because there's often similar, but there's important differences. Using your standard reports, again, is a very good way to go. And for your vendor to vendor, your platform reports, I think, is the easiest way to go. But if you need to get into the title details, consider that there are differences in the technologies and platforms that will result in one platform sort of prompting the user to do a lot more interactions than another platform might. So here's a version of the platform report that it shows nice and simplified. You've got your overall views. It doesn't get into the specific titles that were used or the specific databases that were used. It just is a nice clean report, and it's, I think, the easiest one to get an overall view of one platform to another platform, but do watch out for those differences. Now, this is the case that I'm most interested in, and that is getting into the data. So to do that, there were 4 steps to match my counter to my book spending. So for my case, I have a lot of places I can go for data. I went to the ProQuest report form for generating the Counter 5 report and the ProQuest ebook Central report form for generating a report about my ebook Central spending and how the use was generated and so forth. So here are my 2 reports. Then I had to find matching data points. I found that proprietary IDs are often very consistent if it's the same vendor. So I have 2 reports from ProQuest. They have matching proprietary IDs in the reports. So I have a lot of other possible matching points, but the IDs worked well. Then to merge the data, I used a VLOOKUP on those IDs to say, okay, I want to pull in the total metrics from the counter report into my the DRM type and other spending type for the other report. And then once I've done that, I can start analyzing and exploring using filters and pivot tables and charts and so forth to look for familiar things, things that are values that are familiar to people. Like at UCF, people know the fund codes, so I want to create a report that reveals that and can show it to my boss who understands our fund code structure. Look for outliers in data and other relevant things. So pivot tables, I learned about these only a few weeks ago. I knew they were there, but I thought, oh, that's a challenge. I don't have time to learn. But it was simpler than I thought, and I think you're going to hear a little bit more about it. But this is a pivot table that I created that has our fund codes, and then some spending data, and then the book request, and then the cost per book request. And over here on one side is the table options, and then I have some filters that can be used. So, and if I just make a few changes, dragging and dropping, I can switch that pivot table up, and now it's showing the purchase type, whether it was an auto purchase or a short-term loan of 1 day or a firm order. So I can quickly generate these tables. So easy, it's amazing, after you've aligned all your data. So then I can turn it into nice charts and tables. So here I have my fund codes, and the chapter request versus book request and the cost per book request. And this is something my boss would be very interested in. And then in the pivot table, I had the option to show the specific books. So I can really dig into it. And one last report here, and then I'm going to hand it over to the other speakers. This is the use of book chapters per subject. So I took the counter data. I could see how the chapters were working, comparing to the title requests per subject. And that green bar that's really the outlier, I looked that up, and it's fiction. So that makes sense. People really want the whole book for fiction. So that's the title request. And the smaller green bar that's still really big is the item request. So for some of the fiction, people are downloading the chapters. But you can really start to see how the type of the content or the subject of the content interacts with how people are downloading and viewing that content. Okay, and I think I'm out of time, so I'm going to pass it over to the next speakers.
Great. Thank you very much, Athena. So next up is Sonja Lendi from Elsevier, and just to say all of the slides from today, there's a lot of information I know will all be on the counter website, so if you're scribbling them all down, they'll all be there for you at the end. So Sonja.
So my name is Sonia Landy. I work for Elsevier, and I'm the usage research manager responsible for the counter reports, the auditing, and internal support for our sales managers. So I've been in the counter executive committee and involved with counter for quite a while, 2011. So it's been part of my life for quite a while. I want to start with the differences between the Release 4 and the Release 5 reports, because we get a lot of questions about that. First of all, I'm going to refer to the reports by their abbreviation. So J1, the journal request, J2, the access denied, J3, access type, and J4, the year of publication. So let's take our average platform. Most platforms will have gold open access content and content that is controlled, so access type controlled in counter terms. If you go to the Release 4 reports, the controlled content only goes into the JR1 and the JR5 report, and the gold open access content usage goes into all of these reports. In Counter 5, The controlled content goes into all of these reports, and the gold open access content only goes into the access type report, which means that there are differences in the total numbers that you see in JR1 and then the J1 report. Another one, big one, is the entitlements or the zero usage. In Counter Release 4, publishers take the entitlements or the list of journals that are available on their platform, and if a journal is not used, the name and information about the title is added to the reports. That is no longer the case in Release 5, and instead you will have to get the entitlement reports, usually KBARD, and combine that with your journal reports to get the information of which journals you have but are not being used. And Athena has kindly given a short summary of how to do that with the book reports. So the closest equivalent, JR1, is if you want to go to the totals, you have to go to J3. If you take the JR1 and subtract the JR1 GOA numbers, you get the totals in the J1. And for JR5, J4 is the closest equivalent, but open access usage is not included in the J4 report. This all goes into, oh, that's another difference, sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. Another big difference for Counter is that they allow the inclusion of distributed usage logging. So if the content of a publisher is available on different platforms, that platform can send the usage to the publisher. It's based on the DOI, it goes via Crossref. That usage is only included in the master reports, not in the standard report. And the report platform will be distinguishable from the actual official publisher platform. At the moment, only Mendeley is using DAL to send information to publishers. And the type of usage that is included is not the take this PDF and put it into Mendeley, because that is reported as official platform usage, but it's the opening of the PDF when it is on Mendeley. So reading, viewing, either in a personal library or when it's shared in a private group. I'll come back to the DOL usage and how to use that for your reporting and later on. Quick summary of the metrics. Athena already went into that. It's total item requests and unique item requests. The main difference between these two, it's both full text usage, but with the unique item requests, it's a platform agnostic metric. So independent of how the platform is designed and how the linking is done when a user comes from externally, the unique item request is most comparable. So a user uses a PDF and an HTML in the same session. It's 2 item requests, which used to be the 2 requests for full text articles in Counter 4, but it will be 1 unique item request. So if they only download the PDF or only look at the HTML in the session, that also will be 1 unique item request. No license access denied. There's no big change between the 2 releases. And the new metric is the total item investigation. So it's the interactions with the article beyond the full text. Again, we've got total and unique. And just to give you an example of what investigations could be, it's interactions with the figures and tables that are available in the HTML page. It's the supplementary material. Some platforms might have tabs that let you navigate to the references or the tables and figures. That can all be counted as an investigation. That's one of the drawbacks of this metric. It's not platform agnostic. Because the platforms are so different, it's not a metric that you can compare. But within a platform, it gives you information about how users use the articles. So a couple of use cases. How do you use these reports? I'd like to go into the title master report. It's a very versatile report. You can rebuild your standard reports. You can make variations of the standard reports that are exactly what you need. You can remove the month from the report, so you have a summary over the whole period. You can select your own metric combinations. You can filter and choose to display or not. So let's say you want a JR5-like report because you need the 2019 data and compare it with the 2018 data where you have a JR5 report. So in this example, we would use the total item request because that is closest to the metric that you have in the old JR5 report. You would exclude the month detail, you take all these information as it is now, you include the year of publication report. You don't filter on access type, but you don't display the access type because you would have to get rid of that later on. And then you need to pivot. So that's where Connie comes in because she'll have a bit of information about that. There's no year of publication grouping. In release 5, sorry. So that is one thing that you will have to work with. And the year of publication grouping was different between publishers, so there's no real answer to that one. So counter reports are used for collection management. That's not changing. So you use the J1 report and the J4 report to look what the full text usage is. If you want to compare between publishers, you look at the unique item requests. But if you want to track the usage over a longer period of time, you take the full total item requests because there's more data available for that.
1 minute to go.
The J2 report, which titles are not being used, so that's the access denied and no license metrics. And a cool new feature would be using the title master report to combine the no license with the year of publication. So you get a more granular view of what the turnaways are and where you can find them. And lastly, the engagement with the content. So look at ratios. How active are people on the platform? What's the ratio between total item requests and unique item requests? The same for total item investigations and unique item investigations. And look at the third-party platform usage, especially for platforms like Mendeley. The value of usage on that platform might be higher than the actual usage on the publisher platform because it's additional to the usage that happened on the platform. So there's more engagement with that particular content. So that's it for me, and over to Connie.
Great, thank you very much, Sonia. So our final speaker is Connie Junge from Wiley. Connie.
Yes, and I need to find where my... Yes, my name is Kornelia Junge. I work for Wiley as Senior Research Manager. And part of my job is to do with data quality. So I get a lot of the questions from libraries who think that their reports are wrong, don't make sense. And you don't need to take notes of this because we have just released the video, Counter Foundation Class 10, working with Counter in Microsoft Excel. So we thought we'd put in a little hands-on session here because not everybody is a sad person like me who works with Excel every day. So Excel is not a mandatory format in Counter because the reports can really get so large that they will not fit into a single Excel sheet, so we could not make it prescriptive. I will focus here, because many people work with Excel as their standard tool, on those cases where we get the most questions to our help desk, and these are how do I add the totals to the reports, and how do I compare two reports, and especially Counter 5 to Counter 4, 2019 to 2018. There's a lot more things on the video, but we have limited time here. So the totals, how do I add them? We have not really got rid of them. I cannot see where I'm here, okay. There. The reports still exist, except they don't exist anymore in the title level report. It turned out because of all this new flexibility that we have here, multiple metric types, multiple access types, you can configure your own reports. It got a little complicated to add the correct totals at the top of each report. And also many systems, it was a little complicated to tell them, please ignore the first row and take only in the title level data. So instead, the title level, totals are now in the platform report. If you really don't care about the titles at all, the simplest method to get totals is to run a platform report. But if you want data about the titles and the totals, the simplest method to do this in Excel is to use the SUMIF function. I copy, here there's enough space at the top, so I can just copy my headers and one instance of each value for which I want to break down. And I call up the, oh, and this is American keyboard. I call up the SUMIF function, and it has three components. I need to tell it where to look for the data, and in this case, my values are always in row column K. And I need to tell it where is my lookup value that I'm actually looking for. And of course, I need to tell it where the numbers are. And these values are in column L. I want the totals at this time. And they also start in row 15 and go as far down as you like. So here you have now the total of total item investigations pulled out of the recording period total column. If I want to copy this over, this will not make sense unless I stabilize this formula. That was the wrong one. This formula. I need to add dollar signs for all the elements which I want to remain stable when I copy. So this is definitely, I always want the column K to be my lookup column, and also I want all the lookups to always start in row 15. And also I want the value that I'm looking for always to be in the column K. And the numbers, the columns will vary, but I also want them always to start in the column, in the row 15. And now I can copy this over and have my totals here, and I could also make them format auto fit column width a little wider. So here are my totals, and I could do the same for the access types, copy over the formula. And of course there I would have to look up my values not from column K but from column J. Very easy. And the good thing is, because all the counter reports have the same format, you can copy this, you save one report like this with the formula, and you can copy it in any other counter report. You just need to make sure that the row length that your report is long enough with the range that you cover. You can put in here a fantasy number. It will simply ignore all the blank values. The number will stay the same. So this is pretty easy way to get the totals. Then the other thing, how do I add up, or how do I compare 2019 to 2018? I have here a very big title master report, and I have filtered here on, when I requested it, on the total item requests only, because this is the value where you can compare 2019 to 2000, or counter 5 to counter 4. We think that the unique item requests will be more popular in future, but they didn't exist in counter 4, and the one that exists are the total item requests. And yes, to pull in data from another report, the standard method how to do that would be the VLOOKUP function. So I have already cheated here and labeled my reporting totals 2019. I will add another column here. Insert, insert sheet column, and I want to pull in data from 2018. And I use the VLOOKUP function. Again, I need several components, and I am using, as Athena said, the publisher identifier is very often the most stable one. So I go into this column here, F15. I need to ask, where do you want to look for the data? And this is my 2018 report. And I give it the column where all my identifiers are. And then I need to tell it which numbers I want. And I want the reporting period total from 2018. So this is the fourth column from the left. So I have to add a number 4 here. You can save yourself all this column counting with a different approach. It's called index match, but I recommend, if you're new to this, start with the VLOOKUP. So I'll put the number 4, and I need to tell it what I want when it doesn't find a match. And then I want an error message. So I hopefully, yes, I got my number, and I can pull this down to all the other rows. And yeah, looks very easy, except it doesn't really work that way, only under very specific conditions. And I can explain this here. You will have some journals which are in one report, but not the other. New journals, ceased journals, so you will get some missing values. And you will also forget to import all the journals from 2018 which had no usage in 2019. And the second problem is, I have used here the identifier, and it has pulled the same number for this journal here, which had the same identifier. It's a journal which has lots of historical title changes and sections and so on. The VLOOKUP will only always grab the first number where it finds a match. So this is really not a good idea to do the VLOOKUP straight then. So one solution to this is, I can add another column here, insert column. First I need to check, are all my identifiers present? Again, I do a VLOOKUP, and I need to use the right. I look up my identifier from column, from the 2019 report. In the 2018 report, I need just one column here. I want from the first column, first and only column that I've selected, I want the value and I want an error message, if I can type correctly, in case it doesn't find it. So here, again, now I see here, oh, this journal is missing, so I need to sort. Sort by, I have headers and I want to sort by my new column, which doesn't have a title. And now I know which journals are missing from the 2019 report. And all of those I would have to copy over.
1 minute, Connie.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is quite complicated, and fortunately there is another option. I can simply copy over the values themselves before I do all this, and I still haven't done a single pivot. Yeah. I go to 2018, and I take my identifiers and go to 2019, copy them here at the bottom, and I need, of course, the usage as well. And I need one column where I tell it, and I can use this rubbish column, which was not very helpful, to tell it that all this usage is coming from 2019, and all this usage is from 2018. And now I can do one of the famous pivot tables. I'll just select the data that I want and go on insert pivot table. Whoop, what? Oh yes, I've forgotten. If you do a pivot table, each column has to have a name. I knew this would be a risk to do it all live, but it's worth it. Insert pivot table. So you have here all the values from your report. I drag in the proprietary ID into the rows. This will usually happen automatically. I want the usage, which is now says 2019 is and oh, I did wrong.
Time is up, Connie.
Okay, I will very quickly. I will show this. Insert pivot table, new worksheet, proprietary ID. Bring the usage in and split by year. And now I can make my comparisons. So these are, yes, we hope there's thousands of ways to do things in Excel, and I'm sure some of you have more sophisticated ideas, but as a basic to start with, I think these are the most useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Well, to see the look on some of your faces as that pivot table magic was happening was quite astonishing. Something from Harry Potter, I think, in Excel there. So we're pretty much out of time, but we've got time for a couple of very quick questions. So if you have any questions, if you want to come up to the mic and just say which institution you're from, and we can take questions there, or you can come up and see the panel at the end if you want to ask one-on-one. So any questions? Yes, first question.
Good morning, William O'Connor, IEEE. I was curious, the difference between COP5 and COP4. COP5's stats are likely to be a little bit lower because of the way they're counting unique visits. How would you counsel your librarians to account for that so it doesn't look like it's artificially lower than the year before? Would you have them ask their publisher maybe for the transition year in both COP5 and COP4 format, or curious?
Well, if you use the total item requests, they are almost 100% comparable. The only difference is the change that we made to the double-click rule, which is now extended for all events to the same time period. And yes, you should not compare the total item requests to the unique item requests from one report to the next. There will be differences between publishers. It depends on the website architecture, if there is a lot of difference between, but yeah, it really, yes, depends.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, well, I know there was a lot there. As we said, there are various Counter Foundation class videos on the Counter website. All of these slides will be on the website as well. And if you want to come up and ask anything one-on-one to the panel or to Lorraine or myself, then please do. But could we just thank all of our speakers very much for speaking this morning? Thank you.
Welcome to the 10th Counter Foundation class, working with Counter 5 reports in Microsoft Excel. Please excuse my accent and all the noise from my keyboard. This tutorial covers several topics, from beginners to more advanced. It uses real data, which come from a demo account, which aggregates usage across many Wiley customers. It is an uncontrolled sample, which customers go in changes over time, so you may see some general trends, but the numbers themselves are not meaningful. First, you need to load the data. If your Counter reports open without any issues, then you can skip this step. Excel is not a mandatory format in Counter because reports can get so large that they will not fit in an Excel sheet. The mandatory format is TSV, tab separated values, which is more robust than CSV, comma separated values. Unfortunately, Excel does not recognize the TSV file extension. Therefore, to open a report, you need to ask it to show all files instead of all Excel files. By the way, if you're not sure where your report landed when you downloaded it, most likely it is in your Downloads folder. Once you have your report and click on it, the report may either open directly or the text wizard may open. This is also a good option because it will give you control over all the columns in the report. Make sure that you choose UTF-8 as the file encoding because this will preserve all your special characters, UTF-8. This is also the place where you can deal with large reports. Should you ever end up with a report that is longer than 1 million rows, first thing, of course, you should ask yourself, do I need all these rows? Should I change my filters? Or do you really need to work with this in Excel? But if you think you must, here is the place where you can import the report in 2 batches. Start the first one at row 1 and the second one at row 1,000,001. On the next tab, you can choose your delimiter. Make sure you have only the tab selected. And on the next tab, you can decide whether you want to leave it up to Excel to decide cell by cell how to format it, or if you want to bring whole columns as text or as date or skip them altogether. This is a very safe method to open reports. If you always want to open the reports with the text wizard, you may need to activate this. Go onto File, Options, Data, Show Legacy Data Import Wizards from Text. Then, next time you want to open a report, don't go onto File, Open. Instead, go to Data, Get Data, Legacy Wizards from Text. Of course, it will then look only for text files. Ask it to get all files and get your report. One other thing that can happen when you try to import your data is that Excel will try and guess your report formats for you. Unfortunately, it's not very good at that. You can still choose the encoding and the delimiters, but you don't have any control over the format of the individual columns, and you may even end up with all numbers formatted as text, so that you cannot do any calculations. Therefore, if you have any problems opening your report in Excel, always use the text wizard. Now let's work with the data. A good thing about Counter 5 is that you can customize your reports so that they contain only the data that you need. You choose one of the master reports, pick your metrics and breakdowns, and exclude everything else. The consequence of this new flexibility is that it is no longer possible to automatically add totals to all the versions of all the reports. But totals are important, so how do you add them without adding apples and oranges? One way to do this is to add filters. You highlight your report body and go on Data, Filter. You can now select a single metric type, for instance. But if you want to add a sum across all these rows, this would still include all the hidden rows, so it is not a good idea. You need to copy the filtered report somewhere else first. Highlight your report body. Depending on your computer settings, it will select only the visible cells if you hit copy. If it does not do that, go to Home, find and select Special Visible Cells Only. Copy into another sheet and you have a clean filtered report. There's also the advanced filters, which will give you additional options. Something else you might want to do is add the report totals right here into this report at the top. There's enough space. You take your column headers, copy them up, and one instance of each value for which you want a total. Then you call up the SUMIF function. The function has three parts: a lookup range, in this case this is column K, starting at row 15, and it does not hurt to make the range a little longer. Who knows how long next month's report might be. All the blanks will be ignored. I need to also give it the location of the value that I actually look for, in this case cell K2, and I need to tell it where the numbers are, and in this case they are in column L and start at row 15. And again we can add a little fantasy number here. If I want to copy this formula into all the other cells, I need to add dollar signs to those elements which need to be stable. Column K will always be the lookup range, and it will always start in row 15. Length, I don't mind. My lookup value in this case is also always column K. The row will vary. The numbers I have in multiple columns, L, M, N, etc., but they will also start always at row 15. And now I can copy this function into all the other cells. There we go. We can do the same for the access types. Copy the formula, but in this case we will have to look up the values not from column K but from column J. You can also convert your report into a table. Highlight your report body and go on to Insert Table. This will give you the filters and the table tools, which include a number of design options. This can be very practical if your report is already very close to the final format that you would like, and if you're looking for a pretty design for a report which you need to circulate regularly. If you really want to drill deep into the data, the most practical tool is the pivot table. To demo this, I have requested here a very large title master report with multiple metric types, multiple report filters and multiple attributes to show. To create the pivot table, you highlight your report body and go into Insert Pivot Table. This will usually go into New Sheet. Here you now see all the columns from your report and you can decide which of them to drag into which of these fields here. Into the values fields, usually you will want to drag a number. Now you have here the total usage from this column. First thing you want to do is break this down by metric type so that you don't add up apples and oranges. Simply drag the metric type into the columns or the rows area and there you go. You can also break down by data type and perhaps by access type. You can format these numbers by going on to Value Field Settings and choosing Number Format. And for usage, usually you don't want any decimal places, but you do want the 1000 separators. You also see here the alternatives which you could request instead of the sums. Lots of statistics plus the count of records in your report. I should of course also be getting rid of the grand totals here because I'm still adding up apples and oranges. So I go on Design, Grand Totals, on for columns only. By default, Excel will add the subtotals and it will organize the table with one column that contains all the header in a sort of layered design. This can be practical, but at other times it may be more useful to use another design, which you can find under Report Layout, Tabular Form, and you can also ask it to repeat all item labels, which is practical if you want to export later on, and to remove the subtotals. You may decide that it is perhaps not so practical to have books and journals in the same report. You could simply move the data type into the Report Filters area. Now you can look at the data types one at a time. Excel has its own ideas about how wide the columns should be. You can change that, but if you make a change to the report, they will go back to their original width. To stop this, you can right-click in the table, go on Pivot Table Options, and disable the Auto-Fit column width. I will now bring in the year of publication, YOP, as another column. You can sort this so that the latest start values are on top. You can also filter here. You may also want to see percentages. You can do this by dragging your usage total into the table once more. At first you have a duplication, but you can click on right-click Value Field Settings, go to Show Values As, and here you have a lot of options. Please try them all out. In this case, the most practical is % of parent row total. So now you see the development of percentage of OA usage over the years. Please don't pay too much attention to the numbers. As I said, this is an uncontrolled sample. In this case, it seems to show a realistic trend, but this is a coincidence. You can overwrite the column headers, but you cannot change the data. Any changes that you want to make, it is always better to do that in the raw data. For instance, the year of publication, if you want to spell that out, you do it in the raw data, go back to your pivot table and hit Analyze, Refresh. And because you changed the name of a field that was part of a report, you have to now bring it back into the report and also redo your sorting. How do you compare two reports? For instance, 2019 versus 2018, when the 2018 data are in counter 4 format. To demo this, I have here a JR1 report from 2018 up to September, and for the same time period, a counter 5 report, where I have filtered on the total item requests. This is the metric that corresponds to the full text article requests in counter 4. You can get this data from a title master report, but also from the TRJ3. You cannot use the TRJ1 because it excludes the open access usage. Let's say I am only interested in the reporting period total for now, so I will hide all the other columns for both sheets. Now I can bring the data from 2018 into the 2019 report with the VLOOKUP function. This has several components. I need to tell it which value I want it to look up, where it should be looking for the data. In this case, I highlight all the columns in my 2018 report, and I need to tell it from which column it should retrieve the data. In this case, this is column H, and because this is the 8th column from the left, I will enter a number 8 here, and I finally need to tell it what to do when it does not find a match. And in this case, I want an error message, and that's it. I can now repeat this for each of the rows, and I can add the headers here and change this one maybe, and now make my comparisons. This looks very easy, but in fact it will work only under very specific conditions. Each of your identifier values may be present in both of the sheets only once. Otherwise you will drag in usage duplicate or may omit some other rows. Also, all the values must be present in both sheets, but there may be journals without usage, or journals which have been newly launched or ceased or transferred, so you cannot guarantee that. So these are the rules how to do a VLOOKUP properly. Instead of using the raw data, create pivot tables for both of the reports that you want to compare. I have already done that here, and I have aggregated towards the Wiley proprietary identifier. I have cheated here a little and added Wiley to the identifier, which was not mandatory in counter 4, but is mandatory in counter 5. You have now exactly one row per identifier when you drag in the usage. I have also done this for counter 5 and done a VLOOKUP that brings in the usage from counter 4 into the counter 5 report. Now you will find some cases where you have missing values, and these will be titles which are present in the 2019 report but not in the 2018. So you know that you will have to copy over this report into the 2018, and the usage at that time was 0. Now you don't get the missing value anymore. If you do this for all missing values on both sheets, only then will you be complete. This is all quite a bit of work. Fortunately, there is another method. Go to your report and add another column. I will call it year, as in year of usage. For this report, the year of usage is 2019. And I will now simply copy over the data from my other report. All I need is the identifiers and the usage. And all this usage comes from 2018. I can now create my pivot table. Drag in my identifier, my usage, and split it by year. And now I can make my comparisons. Have you noticed how easy it is today to retrieve sushi reports? Just put a URL into your browser and get your data. The URLs are constructed following a certain pattern, and you just need to concatenate all the components. You have the base URL, the report that you want, requester ID, customer ID, and all the dates. In case of master reports, you would also add the filters and attributes. The concatenation of all these follow a simple principle. Cell A, cell B, and you connect them with the ampersand. This way you can construct a whole sushi query string out of these components here. You can populate the sheet with queries for all the reports from all your publishers, and perhaps even write a little macro that will retrieve your data for you. You can also try the following. Go to Data from Web and insert the query right here. Whether this works depends on your computer settings, your version of Excel, and the network that you are in, and I don't know what else. In this case it worked, although I've got an exception. Of course, I put in a fake customer ID, so I don't get any data. If the direct import does not work, you can still copy the URL into a browser. You would then need to save the report somewhere. I have prepared something for you. You would get the saved report from Data, get data from file JSON. The report header and the body come in different units. You click on it. This will retrieve the body and break down. As soon as you see only record items here, you can convert the data into a table. And now you have column where you see this little expand button here. This means there is a lot of more data behind it. You can select or just choose them all. And anytime where you have a column with this expand button, you can click on it and expand. Expand to new rows will create a new row for each different item it finds. Extract values will put them all into one string concatenated through a delimiter which you can specify. I can expand further and further. This one is now complete. I extract the next one and more, and now already I see my data. So yes, this is the principle how you import JSON data into Excel, and then you continue as usual, pivot, filter, whatever you like. Thank you for listening. There are many different ways to do the same thing in Excel and many more options and functions. We hope you found this useful. Please visit our Counter YouTube channel for more foundation classes and come to our website projectcounter.org for the friendly guides and other materials.